Hello. So today we have Sarah Slubowski here to share some information with us about how writing instruction happens, particularly in our lower school. That's our elementary program for kindergarten to grade 5. Um, Sarah has been with the school for a long time and has deep experience. I'm going to invite her, even though she may feel uncomfortable, to do it, to brag a bit about herself before she dives in to share the just incredible depth and care that we take at the school with writing instruction across the curriculum. So Sarah, what's your little bit of your background?
Okay, so I've always been a teacher. So I have been in the education field now for, my goodness, how long have I been out of school? I don't even want to say, maybe almost 30 years. So I have been at Acera for almost 10 years, and I've played different roles. I've been a math teacher and a teacher mentor, and I support the school and the admin in other ways as well. Some of that is around student assessment, but I also come with just a background. I will say my favorite grade to teach ever was 4th grade. That's my sweet spot, but I love all the elementary years, and I've also taught a little middle school. So I have a fair amount of teaching under my belt.
So you did a lot of project-based interdisciplinary learning in your classroom when you were a kind of a lead core classroom teacher before you ended up taking this position.
Yes, I have taught at a number of different independent schools in New York and in New England. And I have done, I would say most of the schools had thematic learning in some degree. I don't think to the depth that we do here. And I don't think there were as many, I would say there weren't as many exciting, well-rounded experiences to really dig in the way our students get to, but I was able to incorporate a thematic learning with writing. And that's what I want to focus on today, is just thinking about writing, particularly in the lower school.
Awesome.
And
also she also has a graduate degree from Harvard Graduate School of Education.
Yes.
On top of the 30 years of experience in teaching.
So yes, sorry. And yes, so I will talk a little bit about, first of all, just writing in the lower school, sort of what does it look like at Acera? I think that as a parent myself, I know that we don't always get to hear all about what's happening in school each day. I get a lot of I don't know, or I can't remember, or recess was really fun. So the some of the pieces that I wanted to show are these are just some pictures of kids actively engaged in writing in different ways in their classrooms.
I think you had a picture from all of our different elementary classes.
Yes, there's
maybe
actually,
you could just tell a tiny bit about what was you saw or what it's endemic of the kinds of things that happen in that classroom.
Absolutely. So we could start sort of, if we want to go sort of lower grades to upper grades, we have over here a student who is deeply engaged in some independent work, which has been differentiated for her. She has some very strong handwriting skills. So she is working on creating a story looking at some, but anyway.
Well, you said there's some amount that's involved with transcription. There's some amount that was like blend, like I think she was working on like SW or something.
Yes, so she's following exactly. So she's looking at some consonant blends. She's using SW words and incorporating them into a creative story. So she was finding a way to practice that handwriting, that spelling, and that story building sort of all in one. So that's a student working individually. If we go down over here, we have right underneath, we have 2 students working together. These are students in a 2-3 classroom. This is in Miss Emily's class, and they were studying paleontology. And these kids are practicing note taking. So thinking of writing as definitely a process as much as a product. And here they're using the writing to help their learning and to support their understanding. We have up here in the upper left, we have some students in Miss Jill's class. So this is a 3rd, 4th grade classroom. And they have a warm up in the beginning of their writing block. They are doing Wordle, which many of us are probably familiar with. And this is a great student-led activity. So one student is running it and he's chosen the word. We have a transcriber here who's keeping track of the letters that people have used and marking where they've landed or not landed. And students are engaging. They are each taking turns. If one of them's name is called and they need some help, they can ask for support from a classmate. It's really an engaging interactive activity that gets the kids thinking about words. The teacher is throughout consistently sort of adding in pieces of literary instruction. So she is working in looking at spelling. There might be a word, there's a C as the second to last letter. So what could our last letter be? You know, and asking kids to react. Well, there could be an E with a silent E, there could be a T or a K. So bringing those pieces in and then looking at the next word to see how that could relate. So this is just sort of a fun, engaging activity, but still really deepens and uses pieces of that literacy work.
So instead of it being doldrummy of like, this is the lesson for today, here, do a worksheet. It's super fun. It's interactive. Kids are also getting practice presenting things. They're also getting practice taking turns with each other. But it kind of makes it fun and interactive, but they're getting this rich instruction coached in at the same time.
Exactly. So she can really be a part of it. There are also pieces where kids will do things on paper. So you will, you know, they also, for instance, in the same class, work on word ladders where they're trying to figure out what the next word, if I change this one letter, it's going to move to this. And that gives some of the same pieces. That's more individual work, though, that they're doing on their own. And they're all going to then practice writing out the words and seeing some of the connections themselves. But it's important to do it in different modalities. So kids are really, again, they're engaged, they're working as a group, they're feeling like they're part of a writing community, and that literacy is all around them. We have our last two pictures. These are both 4 or 5 classes. So in the bottom left, these are some kids working individually on, I believe these were essays. So they had moved from paragraphs. They're working on essays here. And a couple of them are having one of them is sort of supporting the other. They're asking for some peer input and some feedback on their work. The other students are working independently. At the same time, I actually was in the room on this day, and at the same time, the teacher was pulling kids one-on-one to really give some independent guided support in their writing. So they were working on, you know, the teacher was, oh, so I see, I think I was confused here because it looks like you moved quickly from that quotation mark. So how could we change that? And, you know, the kids, oh, I think I need a transition. So how can we make that flow better? So that kind of literally really one-on-one in-depth support, really thinking analytically about their writing. So that's kind of an example of what's happening there. Over here on the right, another 4-5 class. And this was a great lesson I popped in on. And Alyssa was working with the kids on thinking about verbal expression versus written expression. And she also wove in a lesson about subject and predicate and talked to the kids, you know, somebody asks a question, where were you this weekend? At the mall. So at the mall, is that a sentence on its own? No, it's not. Does it make sense in the context of speech? Absolutely. What are we missing when we put that on paper? Well, there's no subject. Who's going to the mall? We don't know. So talking to kids about thinking about their audience, thinking about pieces of a sentence, and tying that together. That then wove into an activity where the kids got up and they were writing observational sentences about things happening in the room.
So was that part of a morning meeting discussion? Not sure. Well, so
that actually was part of it. It came out of a discussion they were having in morning meeting and then moved into really it became their morning literacy work.
Yeah. So
that happens a lot in class.
I think that's endemic of what you will see a lot. So the kids are connecting with each other. They're having fun. There's conversation, there's inquiries coming from the students, and then the teacher's able to turn that into something that is academic.
Yes,
but the kids are engaged and involved in it, and it's building on something that's personal to them.
Definitely.
And that's how engagement and growth occurs because it's wrapped around them as individuals.
Absolutely. So, and going on to my next slide, which was giving me a moment there, I wanted to pause and just think about the writing process in general. And just reminding all of us of the complexity of the process and the different pieces that kids are weaving in. And this is really happening at all grade levels and all ages and all development, wherever you are in your development as a writer. So kids are thinking about critical thinking, they're generating ideas, they're gathering information, they're thinking about the process overall. So organizing, brainstorming, writing, revising, iterating on their work. kids are tying in the syntax piece. So looking at grammar, punctuation, the structure of a sentence, to the structure of a paragraph, to the structure of an essay. They're looking at text structure. So essentially looking at what kinds of writing they are producing and thinking about. They're thinking about, they're having to tie in craft. So that's where they really you might see their own voice really coming out. Thinking about word choice. I see that a lot in classrooms. You will often see a poster on the wall, like rich verbs that we came up with. So instead of, he walked over to see his friend, it's he bounded over to see his friend, and really deepening that for kids. Transcription is a really important piece. And it's sometimes, that's one of those pieces that feels like it can be a struggle or not as fun. That's really incorporates getting everything onto the page. So that can be handwriting, typing, word processing, and so which differs from typing in that it's really encompassing the whole act of really using a computer and the different pieces. You're also looking at spelling, building words, and thinking about those kinds of pieces. So there's a lot going on. I want to pause too here to say this is a fabulous, I really like this graphic. I like the colors. I feel like it sort of shows the complexity. And this actually just came out of a meeting I popped into last week, which was 2 teachers and a literacy specialist all were having a conversation about where some different places where they were pulling some writing content and where they were getting ideas and looking at current literature. And they said, hey, let's have every other week, just a quick half-hour meeting where we touch base and we connect on writing. So I joined them, which was great. And now I'm looking forward to being a part of this. But I think it's a great example of how our teachers, they are well-trained, they're incredibly experienced. I think all of our core teachers right now have masters and just a lot of experience and knowledge, and they're also continually wanting to learn more. Yeah. So even outside of a PLC, one of our professional learning communities, or outside of staff meeting or other professional development, they're still seeking their own, which I think just speaks volumes.
So I mean, there's constantly teacher generated new learning opportunities, and then sharing of tools and growing. And then as new things are kind of thought about and uncovered in the research and the work about learning, teachers bring it in, but they've got the autonomy as really, they're all lead teachers. Yeah. And they're bringing these things in both organic and intentional ways. So that professional development is happening in so many different ways woven into our school.
And it's genuine. All year. Right. Yeah, I mean, this came out of a genuine interest and a conversation between a literacy specialist and a teacher. And then a couple more of us joined in, and it's amazing that this can happen. I wanted to talk a little bit about our specific student body in writing. I think our kids come to us with so many strengths that, we sometimes forget that there are certain pieces that can be challenging. When you have so many thoughts in your head, you are a deep, complex thinker, with usually particularly strong verbal reasoning skills, receptive language, expressive language, verbally. You'd think, oh, these kids can write everything down. There's almost so much going on in there that they actually need more support, and really need that direct instruction. And they also need ample time. So they need lots of time and space to just practice writing. But it can overwhelm them. Where do I start? What should I write about? I don't know what piece to pick, or how do I organize it? What should I include? What should I not include? It's a lot. So we really work to explicitly support kids with that. I think there's a lot of ways teachers do that, but one way is just in the planning process and helping kids sort of take a pause, think about what they're writing about, and offer scaffolds to support kids with that. There is certainly not one way that teachers say, this is how you write, and this is how we want you to organize it. There can be all kinds of different ways that teachers do it and bring it in to support their kids. But I just think it's important to note that, particularly for our kids with these strengths, writing can actually be a challenge. It can be a place where they're coming up against something.
I think usually we see that writing is the hardest academic skill for our kids to learn. I'd say frustration tolerance is the hardest emotional intelligence skill for our kids to learn. Yeah. And the two are interwoven.
Absolutely, absolutely. And these kids also have incredibly high standards for themselves.
Yes.
So a lot of times they feel like if they put something on paper, that makes it official and it should be complete and perfect and represent every thought they had in their head, which is simply not always realistic.
Yeah.
And it's also not always what writing is for. So I think it's thinking about what kind of expression is appropriate or expected for a different situation. So, you may be put, the end goal may be this formal writing piece, or it may be that you are taking notes on how a poem made you feel. So there are very different ways we use writing to help learn, and then also to be this sort of final product to show what you've learned, but they are different. And our kids are really able to intellectually tease apart the difference there, but it takes guidance for us to help them get there, as it would for all kids. And for all kids, I just wanted to pull out sort of, these are some recommendations for just sort of best practices and across the field. And these are things that are found to really be true at all grade levels. So it's not sort of, this is what we need when we're in kindergarten, and this is what we need when we're in 6th grade. And because honestly, at Acera, there are things I see happening. I mean, you might see a kindergartner writing the morning message on the board, and the same thing happening in room 2. There are kids at different levels who love, actually I just had a conversation with Bob, and I know Jen and Lisa do this all the time, about kids loving when teachers purposefully make a mistake in a morning message. They get to identify it and find it and correct it. So there are certainly things that can be true really at all grade levels. Yeah. So one thing on just going by these, direct instruction in the writing process and in writing strategies. So it is there, I feel like there have been times in education where it's been sort of, oh no, just let them write. And if they just write and write and write, it will develop and grow. Kids do need guidance. They need instruction. There are pieces that they really need to get support in. And I think that our teachers are great at doing that. We explicitly teach appropriate writing strategies really for each step of the process, which could include specific instruction around sentence structure, or learning how to express yourself for a different audience, and changing what you're writing to be more formal or to be more,
And there's also so many different kinds of writing too, that they're working on, and they'll work on them in, like, you're going to work on analytical writing in much more depth as kids get older.
Right. So you'll write, maybe in 1st grade, you're writing about opinion. So it may be opinion writing, whereas by the time you get to 5th grade and you're moving, you're really working on more of an argument piece. So that shows kind of the development and the arc that can take. So that's really important. Frequent writing for varied purposes. And that kind of goes to what Courtney was just saying about the different purpose of the different audience. We want kids to be writing, not just sort of in a 30-minute writing block. We want kids to write across all aspects of what they're doing in school. And I think that really happens at Acera. We see writing in, certainly when you're in the middle school, you're writing in electives, you're writing in all these places, but same with elementary. You're writing during core time. I would say the most instruction is happening during core time, but you're also writing in your core specials, you're writing in math, you're writing, there are examples of it happening in other places. And I think the way we tie in thematic studies is a really important piece here, because there are times where you are not just writing for writing, you're writing to, those kids who are doing their paleontology study, for instance, they're using writing as a means to deepen their understanding. Which kind of moves into, I'm going to skip one because I want to talk about integration of writing and reading right now, because that I think really also connects with what we do in theme. But there are studies that show it's connecting writing and reading, and also writing about what you read. So writing about what you read is a really important piece there. And I think that ways that our teachers do these things, they are differentiating instruction, as you see with one-to-one conferences. They are assessing student strengths and areas for growth. As we were talking about that teacher meeting one-on-one with kids, she's looking at their writing and figuring out where that child needs to grow. She's also going to be looking and seeing as a class, oh, actually, our whole class is struggling a bit with transitions. Let's work on that together. So I think that's a piece that we see. I want to go back, the building students' fluency in transcription. So the handwriting, typing, spelling, these are really important pieces. And I think, today I think it's interesting. I actually spoke with a teacher recently about, gosh, I'm working in a 4 or 5 class. I feel like these guys still really need handwriting. And we talked about the impact of COVID and kids really spending a lot of time on the computer. There's a lot of focus on typing. And then we need to back up. Kids need to be able to read their own handwriting. And she was helping the kids understand why. Why do you need legible handwriting? And these are pieces. I was actually sharing, I had just heard from somebody at the high school level that they are having kids write more in-class essays by hand, as a way to sort of know that the child is writing it, just with the incoming, everything going on with AI. So that is a piece. So the handwriting is important, the typing, and kids do have explicit time to work on those, really across the lower grades. You'll see that really in all the elementary classrooms, as well as spelling. And also, I would say you're building fluency in transcription. It's also in the construction, I think, of writing. So the construction of your sentences and your paragraphs and your essays. And now I'm going to skip ahead. So studying and emulating models of good writing. This is really important. And I think that we obviously do that through literature and book groups, but I see our teachers doing a lot of writing together. So the teacher will really model how to write a paragraph, for instance, and with input from the kids. So they really feel like they're part of that writing community, but they will work together to build that writing piece. And through that, the kids can hear the teacher working through a word choice and figuring out where they need to go to really make that paragraph come alive. So that's a piece that I've seen in a lot of classrooms. And again, this goes at all age levels, I would say, are doing that. The other piece I want to talk about, building student engagement in the context of a writing community. We have, I think, very much built that at Acera. I think kids, if you just look around the walls, you can see examples of students' work. There are also examples in classroom. I went into a classroom where I was happy to learn about the history of daylight savings time, which has always been something that has interested me. And there was one of the morning work for that day had been for students in the class to read an essay written by a former student from that teacher, all about daylight savings time. And it was a great example of students looking at a model of good writing, but also feeling that engagement and that connection as part of a community of writers. I think that also happens when children share writing with each other. There have been a number of instances just this fall where I've seen classes work together on a collaborative writing piece. So in Miss Emily's class, they wrote a blog together, and the kids were incredibly proud to really contribute to that and create that written piece together. In Miss Deborah's class, they did a piece where she gave them an outline, and kids were given different chunks of the outline, and they wrote their own paragraphs essentially based on those notes and that outline, and then put it all together into an essay. So those are interesting ways that I think teachers build excitement and enthusiasm, and also just that feeling of community. Here are just some examples I have that I wanted to touch on. On the left, this was in Emily's class. They were working on portfolios, and the kids were reflecting on their writing. This is a really important piece to think about self-reflection. And this can be used sort of for planning purposes, and also for when you're going back and editing and revising. So they were talking about books they had read and informational paragraphs they were writing. So it's an example of time together, reading and writing. It's also helping kids to look at what did I learn about? I learned the format of a paragraph. I learned how to include details. I learned how to write a closing sentence and how to write a focus statement, how to write a blog. And there might be places they struggle with. I still struggle to write closing sentences, but I'm getting better. So really looking at that self-reflection piece. And then if you look on the right, this is from Jill's class. So this is a 3-4 class, and this is an October rubric. So she and I were talking about how she likes to change the rubrics, possibly every month, or maybe depending on sort of where they've gotten with it. So you can see your growth not only across that month, but then month to month, going throughout the year. So, and this is probably a lot to look at on your screen right now, but it really lets kids very specific and helps kids understand. So beginner level for topic sentence, there is no evidence of a topic sentence. In other words, it's not even there. But if you look to basic 2, the topic sentence is a little confusing. Then we go to the topic sentence is strong and clear. The topic sentence is strong, clear, and interesting. So then you're getting into grabbing the reader. And she breaks this down for supporting sentences, concluding sentences, organization and flow, and the mechanics really in every sentence. And if you're looking at this and wondering what FRED stands for, I believe it has to do with the supporting details. So, goodness, I'm now blanking on what the FREDs are. But as you can see, the kids are given really specific. They can see the expectations, and they can also really assess themselves as they're working on their writing, which is incredibly important. Because they can see where they are, and they can also see where they can grow. Because it's a really important piece of Acera is that we never want that ceiling to feel like, there is a ceiling, much less closing in. So we want to make sure that they always know where they can grow. Also important is just one thing I was just thinking about as I'm coming to a close here is just thinking about how Acera students really experience writing as a tool for expression, both as a process and as a product. I think I've talked a little bit about that, but just thinking about exploring ideas, refining your thinking, and also your audience. This could just be for you, or maybe this is going to become something more formal. And then also thinking about writing as a product. And really, I just love this picture on the right because you can really see this child's pride in showing that. She's written a book and she's showing her teacher. But it's something that she's worked on. So she's not just done. It's not this sort of, I've written it and it's done and I move on, but it's a real iterative task. And it's something we come back to and we change and develop. So I think that's a really important piece. And I just want to circle back to thinking about writing as an area for continued improvement for our students. For them, there is often a gap between what they can understand and express verbally and what they can put on paper. And also a reminder that, there are all different types of things we put on paper, and they're all valuable and important. But our kids can struggle with that. Writing is iterative, it's challenging, and it can cause frustration. And for some of our kids, they can shut down, and there can almost feel like there's periods that are somewhat static in a child's writing development. And I've noticed that as a teacher, when I was teaching my own class and also being here supporting teachers, you see that that almost feels like, and then all of a sudden the next year or the next class they're in or the next writing piece, it's like, who wrote this? Oh my gosh. And 3 things have all come together at once.
The integration of all the hard work and the coaching, it's uneven. And it can feel like you go for a long time with very little progress. And then suddenly there's like a breakthrough thing. Yeah. We see that with kids all the time. It can be very frustrating for parents to watch.
And sometimes we don't have the window into it. I'm going to speak as a parent. You don't have the window into it. And then, my son brought home a newspaper. I've got 2 articles in here. And I'm thinking, who wrote these? Like, I can't believe your writing, sounds like that, because I still think of you as the last time you brought something to show me, it was probably in 3rd grade.
Well, and for parents, it's so tricky because a lot of times kids are reticent to show their parents their work. They don't want the kind of feedback on the spelling or the parents' ideas, and so then they just keep it all hidden.
Yeah.
And then as a parent, you could feel like, wait, there's no writing happening.
Right. And if you give me the idea, it's plagiarism, and then I can't use it. I need to think of it myself.
So there's just tremendous amount of writing that's happening for all of our kids every day across the curriculum.
Yeah.
And there's so much training and intention about how teachers structure that, how they support each other, how our teacher mentor Sarah Slubowski helps people with it. It's a really important, robust emphasis at our school.
It really is. And again, it looks really different for different kids at different stages. But our teachers are incredibly adept, particularly our teachers here, I find incredibly adept at differentiating for those kids.
Yeah.
And meeting them where they are. And I will say that I think writing is a place where actually that differentiation can feel more natural.
Yeah.
I don't feel like kids here, I don't feel like kids here really feel held back in anything, but particularly in writing, they really can.
Yeah.
And kids will start their own newspapers
Yeah.
here, and there's so much room for expression for them.
Yeah.
But I think that our teachers really encourage that growth with just no ceiling.
And that's also why you don't want a specific writing program or specific grammar program, because those can be a limit and can be a misfit. So teachers have the autonomy to pick and bring in the right approach, writing program, philosophy, emphasis, rubric, scaffold, whatever it is at the age and stage of development and need of every child.
We have a number of teachers, who will use the 6 traits of writing. We have teachers who will bring in, pieces of grammar, and let's use the same, I'm going to use the same underlining technique to show you what I'm looking for in terms of this editing. But, then there's also just the autonomy to make it work for your kids in that moment.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
But it really all comes down to the teachers, and they're truly incredible, and almost as incredible as our kids.
Yeah. But they also get a lot of support. They have opportunities to get the professional development they want, and they just authentically are constantly sharing ideas and strategies and supporting each other, which is a key reason the teachers love to work here, because it's such a collaborative culture. And we're all so unified in our devotion and focus on helping these kids develop across all areas of their profile and helping them become their best self. So Sarah, thank you for all the work you do with our,
thank you.
A lot of times your work is behind the scenes for parents. So it's great for them to get you to hear your voice describing all this.
That's my happy place.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes. But thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. All right.
All right.
Thanks a lot. I hope this was helpful.